So here we have an aesthetic functional feature that makes some clever use of space, a floating bathroom vanity. All we use is a couple of power tools, touch of your own creativity. Trust me, this is something you can definitely do in your own spare time. Let me show you how. I made it out of 21mm laminated pine, which I cut according to my cutting list. You are going to need some basic power tools, and for that I'm using the Einhell mini circular saw, the drill driver and the random orbital sander. You are going to need hardware, and for that I've got 5x50mm screws, 3x16mm screws, and I'm going to be using a bit of wood glue in between the mating joints, and at the end I'm going to be staining and sealing it with the Fired Earth Woodworks in the Emboya color. So let's start by cutting our pieces. Now the first piece I'm going to cut is a ride support, which is the piece that is 210 by 185mm. So with the tape measure, I'm going to measure and mark. Now I'm sure you're wondering why I'm using a spirit level to draw a straight line. That's because I'm also going to be using it as a straight edge. So no matter the circular saw, using a straight edge as a guide guarantees that you have a straight cut. And what I really like about the Einhell mini circular saw is that the blade is recessed. So when I line up the cutting guide with the cut line, mark the outside of the base plate, and then line that up with the straight edge, clamp it into place, I'm guaranteed to get a straight cut. So mark, measure and cut all the pieces according to my cutting list. What I really like about the mini circular saw, it's lightweight, which makes it very easy for it to be a single-handed operation. So here are all my pieces. I've got the backing, the base, the top shelf and the ride support. Now before I can do the assembly, I'm going to give them a quick sanding to remove the rough edges, number one. Number two, to prep the surface for when I apply the stain and the sealant. And for that, I'm going to be using the Einhell random orbital sander. What I really like about these tools is that they're on the same power platform, which means the batteries are interchangeable. Don't forget to sand all your edges and to sand in the direction of the grain pattern. And I'm making use of an 80 grit sandpaper. Before I start the assembly, I'm going to give my workspace a bit of a clean. Now the first step is to decide which is going to be the front facing side. I think we all agree this looks really nice. It's got a lot of character to it. So once I've stained and sealed it, it's going to look really good. So this is going to be the front side. That means I'm going to put it facing down. Have the back of the backing facing up, because that's where I'm going to be inserting the screws. Instead of using a tape measure and a ruler to measure and mark the thickness of the timber, I'm just simply going to use one of the pieces as a guide. It's a lot easier. So I'm just going to line that up with the edge, score a line. And I'm also going to be putting a timber piece on the right hand side. Score that line and use the actual piece to determine the height. Then I'm just going to simply randomly mark where I'm going to be putting the screws. If I mark at the center of these, put the screws in, it's going to line up with the center of the edge. And that's going to give me a really strong joint. Before attaching the pieces of timber onto the backing board using the screws, I'm going to start by drilling pilot holes. This will ensure that the wood doesn't split as I insert the screws. Always use a scrap piece of timber under the piece that you're working with. Number one, it's going to prevent blowout. Number two, it's going to avoid you drilling into your workbench. I'm using a speed pilot to drill my pilot holes. And the nice thing about a speed pilot is that it also countersinks the holes for the head of the screw. I'm just going to mark the drill holes for the top shelf. For that, using the square as a guide. This will ensure that it's positioned straight. Score a line using the thickness of the timber as a guide. All my pilot holes are drilled. It's time for the assembly. I'm going to start with the base. I'm just going to apply a thin bead of wood glue on one of the mating surfaces, clamp it into place and fasten it with the 5x50mm screws. The bottom shelf is attached, and now do the same for the side support as well as the top shelf. Always remember, apply a bit of wood glue on your mating surface. This will give you a much stronger join. The last 2 screws are to secure the side panel to the top shelf. So the build is almost done. It's time to give it a bit of color. You can actually go with the color of your choice. I'm using the Fine Earth Woodworks in the Emboya color. It's a stain and sealer in one. And because it's a sealer, it's actually going to protect it against the moisture. Application is easy. Simply use a paintbrush. And remember, always paint with the grain. Make sure that you get a good, even coverage. And because it's water-based, cleaning up is easy. Simply rinse the brush in some water. Now you need to know where to drill on the base so you can attach the towel rail. Now a handy tip here, it's a masking tape. Pull it across, ensure that it's straight, mark where the holes are, and once that is dried, we'll peel it off, stick it on the base. There we are. Now you know where the screws will go, so this lines up. Just make sure that the distance from the edge to your marked points is equal. And because it's tape, you can adjust it. And once you're happy, mark through the tape onto the timber. That's where you're going to be mounting the screws. Now towel rails come in different makes. This one is a mounting plate. So I'm going to put the 3x16mm screws through the mounting plate and onto the base, and then attach the towel rail onto the mounting plate. There we are, job done. Simple as that. 2 nail-in anchors, it's mounted, and I think it looks great. You know the feeling when the DIY is complete and you're just standing there looking at it with a great sense of pride. And I do hope that it also inspires you to give it a try. Trust me, this is something that you can definitely do in your own spare time. Now all the hardware that I've used today is available at Builders in store. Shop a range of the Einhell battery operated power tools online at builders.co.za. For more videos like this, check out the blog and the website. Get to Builders, get it done.